full of injury updates. Of course, you've got a yacht, Stephania.
Of course.
Let's dive into a handful of injury updates here. And I want to start with a positive one. Sometimes we say some negative stuff, but we're supposed to maybe get Justin Jefferson back, Stephania. What can you tell us about that? And should we be excited as fantasy managers?
Well, we should be excited. We should be excited for Justin Jefferson because he just makes the game of football better.
Oh, yeah.
So we are thrilled that he is coming back this week. All signs point to that, barring a huge surprise. I think it's important to recap just what we've been through while we've ridden along with Justin Jefferson on this injury train. Yeah. He was injured week 5 when he slipped in the end zone while making a cut during a route or near the end zone, and immediately knew that something was wrong. Mm-hmm. This is a young man who had never missed time due to injury in the 3 years he'd been in the NFL prior to this. So it was really tough for him, a significant hamstring injury. Do you know prior to this, he had played 92% of the offensive snaps. That's how important he was to his team. Ends up going out on injured reserve, but he was very clear, and the Vikings were clear all along, that he was not going to return at 80 or 90%. He wanted to be sure that he was 100%. And while you've often heard me say, if you've listened to me over the years, that the only way to know that you're really past a soft tissue injury is to go out and play and not have a setback. So until we accomplish that, we won't know for sure. But with all the metrics and all the performance testing, functional testing, all the sensors that they wear that can look at acceleration, deceleration, load volume, all of that. Yeah. He is now at a place where he feels comfortable. He's obviously been back in practice for a while. Yep. And I think we took our cues from him being limited in practice. As long as he was limited, he wasn't coming back. Well, now he's full participant. He looks the part. He is ready to go. We're going to see him at the Raiders. And for fantasy purposes, what I would say is we talk about performance metrics dipping often for players coming off of significant soft tissue injuries at the skill position, like wide receiver, like running back. But on average, wide receivers miss about 5 games. We talked about him being injured in week 5. We're at week 14. I think that extra time and his insistence about not coming back till he was at his peak form, I'm not looking for much of a drop-off in performance. I mean, we'll have to see when he gets into the game, but I think from a volume standpoint, maybe it won't be 92% of the snaps, but I think it's going to be high volume, high workload. I don't think there's going to be restrictions on him. Gosh. I'm looking forward to seeing the Justin Jefferson that you had in week 1.
I am very ready for that as well. And I think everything that you're describing sounds like because this kid said to himself, I'm not going to come back until I'm fully ready. The idea of the recidivism that sometimes we see in these injuries where guys come back, you talk about, well, you know, Stephania, we learned some things here, but you feel a lot better because rather than try to come back maybe a little too early or come back and push it 100% when he needs to have a little bit of a ramp up time, it's like, no, I want to take my time. I want to make sure that I feel like I'm 100% there. And that's kind of what it feels like with what you're describing. So that when we throw him out there, that expectation isn't that big drop off that we have felt like for some of the other players we've seen.
You bring up a really good point because one of the things that players deal with when they have a significant hamstring injury is apprehension. Yeah. They are afraid to stretch it out. They're afraid to really let loose and go at full speed because they're afraid that the hamstring is going to pull. So having had the opportunity to test it in so many different ways, I think makes him more confident going into the game. All of that is a factor. I don't think we appreciate it often enough, but I really think those things could be the difference in what you see from him out of the gate on Monday night.
Justin Jefferson will be back this week then, and you should have him in your fantasy lineup.
Not Monday night.
Well, not Monday.
Against the Raiders.
Yes,
we have 2 Monday night games.
That's right.
There's a lot to keep track of.
There's a lot to keep track of there. All right, Stephania, a couple more updates here with the NFC North as well. You got Christian Watson, who we saw pull up with the hamstring, and Aaron Jones, who's been dealing with a bunch of stuff. What can you tell us about a couple of Packers?
Well, so Aaron Jones is a tough one. This is an MCL sprain for him, injured week 11, which was November 19th for them. And he's been out ever since. Now, he came back to his first practice on Thursday. They do play Monday night. Okay. So, again, your first practice report is on Thursday. And I'm told he was moving very well, listed as a limited participant. But it's still hard to know if this is going to be enough for him to actually play in a game on Monday. We've seen Aaron Jones out with an MCL sprain before he's come back more quickly. But you have to remember, this is a guy who had a hamstring injury in week 1. That he was then out till week 4, came back with a low volume of work, re-injured in practice the following week, missed more time. And when he came back, it wasn't until week 9 that we saw his normal workload.
Okay.
And then he was injured again week 11. So think about that. In the spectrum of the entire season, we haven't really seen Aaron Jones at full strength other than for about 3 weeks. Week 1, he looked fantastic. And then this little mini stretch, 9-10, until he got hurt in week 11. So I'm not sure if he's back this week. You're going to have to follow the reports up until game time. But even then, I'd be a little bit concerned from a fantasy standpoint about how much work does he get. Obviously, they haven't been getting it done on the ground, so they're going to want to use him. But I'm just a little nervous from the injury standpoint. As far as Christian Watson, another right-sided hamstring injury. This is the one that caused him to start the season in week 4. I mean, he had the injury in the preseason, did not start until later. If you saw him, did you see this when he went down?
Christian Watson?
It was almost like when a player takes himself to the ground when they're trying to stay in bounds. And like he just curled up into a little ball and then grabbed his right hamstring. Pretty hallmark sign that he knew exactly what was going on. I feel for him. This has become a chronic problem for him. And you wonder, scar tissue, and that can cause problems where you have this re-injury rate. Hard to imagine him playing on Monday night. Didn't practice on Thursday. He says this episode not as bad.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to imagine him playing with the history that he has.
He has been so tough for fantasy managers this year. We've obviously had a lot of conversation about Christian Watson this season with everything that we've done. However, I don't think that we're expecting him. We pulled him out of the projections for this week. We're not expecting him to play Monday night. Jaden Reed, a guy that we may talk about a little bit later in the show, because he has looked fantastic for these Packers as a pass catcher in the last couple of weeks.
Do you know that Christian Watson had somewhere between 1 and 3 catches from weeks 4 to 11?
Wow.
That was it. And remember, because we kept talking about winner, right?
Yep.
And then week 12, 5 for 94. Week 13, 7 for 71. But then he goes down.
Then he goes down. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if the volume is that going to be the Achilles. I shouldn't use the Achilles heel. But I mean, is that going to be a problem for him? Is that kind of volume and workload going forward? I wonder.
We'll have to continue to watch that and manage that as well. We'll check in on Aaron Jones as well on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday. Make sure that you check in with us on ESPN2 and ESPN News this week from 10 to 12 p.m. on ESPN2 and then 12 to 1 on ESPN News. All right, Stephania, let's talk Derrick Henry because, again, we talked at the beginning of the week. There were some conflicting reports about a concussion or not having a concussion. They've got a game on Monday Night Football, so they have an extra day regardless of what's going on. What do you know about Derrick Henry?
Well, just to recap, he was evaluated for a concussion late on Sunday. And, when he was evaluated, it was very late in the game, so he didn't return. So I don't think we had the full picture. But he was not in the concussion protocol at the start of the week, as Mike Vrabel said, which means that they did not believe that he suffered a concussion. That doesn't mean they don't follow the athlete for symptoms, monitor, make sure there's nothing that's a setback in the start of the week. And Monday, he went through a workout and got through it fine. Did not have any symptoms. So he continued as a regular participant for this week. Now, he got a rest day on Thursday, but Derrick Henry gets rest days all the time. So this was literally a rest day, not an injury-related thing. We do expect him to play Monday Night Football.
Okay. Love to hear that. If you're a fantasy manager, you want Derrick Henry out there on Monday night. What about Breece Hall? He injured his ankle. Are we going to see him this week?
Yeah, it's not clear exactly when this cropped up. He was listed on the injury report last week with a hamstring injury. Goes in, has a normal workload for Breece Hall and doesn't have any obvious injury, but then shows up on the injury report because of his ankle. Has not practiced yet this week, but has been doing work on the side. According to Rich Cimini, Breece Hall said he expects to play.
Okay.
So straight from him, he's been very true in his predictions for himself so far. So based on that, it doesn't sound like it was anything serious, but maybe something where proactively they were holding him out.
All right, we'll keep watching that again as we get closer to Sunday on Breece Hall. And we got a couple of tight ends that we want some updates on. What can you tell us?
So Dawson Knox, wrist surgery. Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills has missed 5 games, weeks 8 through 12 with the wrist injury, was designated for return this week, comes back and is a full participant in practice and apparently looks pretty good. So it sounds like Dawson Knox will make his return. We can talk about whether you like that or not for Dalton Kincaid, but I would also say coming off wrist surgery, you're never sure how they're going to be in all phases of the game, so they're going to want to see it. He may not get a pre-injury volume of work. Dallas Goedert, we've been talking about this. I expect to see him back for the Eagles from that fractured forearm, full participant against the Cowboys. And then Darren Waller, we're starting to hear from him, but he is not officially practicing yet, doing a little work, running some routes on his own. Hopes to be back next week. Stay tuned.
Okay.